Very good. We're live streaming now. Everybody's live. Good evening. Today is Monday, May 11th, 2020. Welcome to this evening's regular meeting of the Oregon City Council. Once again, we're coming via video Zoom conference call. We'll look to get back into our conference chambers before too long. Let's begin tonight's meeting by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag
of
the United States of America,
and to the
republic
for
which it
stands,
one nation
under
God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you please take a roll call of council for attendance this evening?
Yeah, let me find my stuff here. I just had it. Mr. Davish,
Here.
Mr. Horniak,
Here.
Mrs. Poloff,
Here.
Mr. Reeves,
Here.
Mr. Seaman,
Here.
Mr. Wallenzak,
Here.
Mr. Zale.
Here.
Thank you. Please note that all members of council are present this evening. Also joining us are Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Mr. Michael Beasley, for our city's law director, our public service director, Mr. Paul Roman, Ms. Tina Evans, our clerk of council. Council, our first order of business this evening is the approval of the meeting minutes from the April 27, 2020 regular meeting of council.
Mr.
Can I get a
President.
motion to accept those or a motion to?
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I move to approve the minutes from the April 27th meeting as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Council, any objections? Here are no objections. The meeting minutes from the April 27, 2020 regular meeting of council are approved as submitted. Council, we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week. Therefore, we need to add items 59 and 60, 2020 to this evening's agenda. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Mr. President,
Mr. Seaman.
so moved to add 59 and 60 to tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Council, any objections? There are no objections. Items 59 and 60 of 2020 are added to this evening's agenda, and we will start with item number 59 of 2020. This item is being presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and City Administrator Mr. Michael Beasley. Mayor, Mr. Beasley.
Mr. Beasley, please.
All right, if the members recall, the City of Oregon is part of a project that allows both commercial and residential properties to make investments in their properties and have the improvements run with the land when it has an energy saving benefit. It's a something that the City of Oregon plays a very simple role in. We just allow the assessment to take place. We don't have any collection risk. We don't have any risk on the capital side. That is all borne by the Port Authority. This project is a partnership between the Lucas County Land Bank and the Special Improvement District that the City of Oregon is a part of. And it's available to all county residents. Just that when, and all county properties, when this happens, and it doesn't happen with residentials very often, we have to pass an ordinance, in this case, allowing that assessment to move forward. So the city takes no risk in it. We're not part of the contract, but we just have to play this role by statute to allow the Port Authority to work with the process and assess it. And we do have funds passed through.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, is there any questions for the administration on item number 59?
Mr. President.
Who is that, Mr. Zale?
Yes, it was.
Yes, Mr. Zale, please.
Yeah, just a question for Mr. Beasley. When people petition for this, is there some kind of guideline that allows certain people to get, like, especially with the private residents like this? Is there some kind of threshold or some kind of guideline that they have to get through to be able to do this?
Absolutely.
It seemed like an amazingly complex piece of paperwork for this amount of money. For this amount of money.
Right. It's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of paperwork. I will just say it's kind of like boilerplate paperwork that the attorneys for, and in full disclosure, I happen to be on both boards. I'm on the Port Authority's Energy Special Improvement District Board as the city's rep on that, and I'm on the Land Bank Board. It is a piece of boilerplate that is required by Ohio law.
Right.
That's why it's so complex. But there is, in this case, a very deep system for underwriting, analyzing, making sure that the energy improvements actually do pay off. So what we wanted to make sure is let's say Mike and Tim, furnace salesman, come along to Tina and say, hey, just sign here or run with your land. But we're, suddenly she's doesn't have a good deal. It doesn't cash out. So there's an energy audit involved and a lot of complex paperwork, and it is underwritten. So though the city doesn't take risks, the Port Authority at the end of the day,
Right.
they,
Is there an income threshold
yes,
for
there
people
is
to
both.
apply for this?
Yes,
And actually, I didn't think 15% savings was very great.
no, and well, that's the decision by the homeowner. If they needed
Right.
the product in any event, it's a way to help finance it in a creative way. And
Right.
from the city's perspective, our interest is we have an interest in having people invest in their homes. We've probably had 5 homes that have been demolished that nobody invested in over the last, 6 or 7 years. And, especially in, some of our places where the values aren't as high. So we have an interest in encouraging this sort of partnership. We feel good that the land bank and nobody could commercially make this work. There's too much underwriting and analysis done. So the land bank does a full analysis of the project in partnership with the Energy Special Improvement District. There's an income requirement, a percentage of value requirement. All those things are put through the program. And I feel good for the homeowner that they're protected. And the Port Authority has an interest in protecting themselves ultimately as the lender.
Mhm.
And it does achieve value for homeowners to allow them to invest in properties that maybe they wouldn't pull the trigger on it. It is
Thanks,
a lot
Mike.
for something that's not a lot.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Zale. Council, is there any further questions for the administration on item number 59? Hearing no further questions, I will assign item 59 with ordinance number 59 of 2020. Ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record. Ms. Evans.
For special assessments for special energy improvement projects and a project plan for the Northwest Ohio Advanced Energy Improvement District under Chapter 1710 of the Ohio Revised Code to authorize and levy special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Oregon in cooperation with the Northwest Ohio Advanced Energy Improvement District, and to approve an energy project agreement in connection with such improvements and special assessments and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Council,
Mr. President,
who is that?
that's Steve.
Steve. Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 59 of 2020 as an emergency measure.
Thank
Second.
you, Mr. Horniak. Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you please take a roll call of council on passage of ordinance number 59 of 2020 as an emergency measure?
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock,
yes,
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
yes,
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Zale.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Please note that ordinance number 59 of 2020 did pass by a vote of 7 yeas, 0 nays. We'll move to item number 60 of 2020. Item number 60 is also being presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and City Administrator Mr. Michael Beasley. Mayor, Mr. Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll start out. Mr. Beasley might want to add something. Council, I think you're aware of this parcel that was owned by the city, which was just west of Dunberger. And the city had that parcel for quite some time, with the understanding an intended use could possibly be a future fire station. We kind of ruled that out as from its location to be a possibility for a fire station. And we couldn't think of any other city intended use. So we believed a best course of action would be to sell that to someone who could put it to good use for a residential home. We had several people express interest in it, so we thought a desire was there. The city did have some investment in that property because when sanitary sewers went in years ago, the city is who paid for the frontage of that with a rather large investment. And so in the interest of recouping that, as well as putting the purchase of that property to use on some of the other parcels that we recently purchased for our town center, we thought the best course of action would be if we had an interested party, and if a bid would come in over $50,000, we thought that would be the best course of action for this parcel. And we did have several bids, and one of them was $60,000, and that is of Rocco Donofrio. So we chose to place it on the agenda for the sale of this parcel, where we felt we could use that investment wiser for parcels we would use.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right.
Mr. President. The other thing I just join in on this is that ultimately we're looking around and also at other parcels, and the same way we went through a lot of goods that we had in our warehousing and our streets department, and we sold them through gov deals and excessive equipment. We don't think it's good for the city or the taxpayers just to hold them. We did check carefully with all the departments, and I think obviously the council knew we were looking at this we talked about it for a while, that we just thought it would be better served to move that parcel. So we went at an auction. People had to submit in writing with sealed bids, and Sandy and Tina were the keepers. They're in charge of all our bidding and our sites. And we've actually, since the process we switched to using gov deals and auctions, we feel much better about how we work these. And we had some good, strong interest, and we felt this was Mr. Donofrio's bid was a strong bid for the parcel, and he'll put it to good use. So we feel good about it. He intends to build a home there. I think it will be a plus for Oregon, and there's no reason for the city just to hold this property. We're looking through other parcels we might have, and we'll let council know if there's other things that we have that we really don't believe it's in our interest is to sit and hold them, unless we really think that long-term that makes sense to have. We don't want to sell something we have to buy back later, but we want to, if it can be put to better use and someone can put a home there or whatever it's intended, we think that's a win for Oregon. So this is a good bid. In fact, Mr. Donofrio, I think I see his name on the screen here, so he's listening in. But we felt it was a good bid, and we're excited to move forward, and somebody can build there.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir, Mr. Reeves.
either the mayor or Mr. Beasley could answer this. Approximately how many bids did we have for this?
We had six bids.
6.
6? Okay, thank you.
Six sealed bids that were delivered by last Friday, I think was the deadline for it. And we held it for a couple of days in case, or last week, just in case somebody got caught up in the mail, because the mail lately has been very late. All
Okay.
right, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council,
Mr.
is there any further
President,
question? Mr. Horniak.
2 questions on this. If I'm seeing this right, am I seeing that right at about 1.77 acres on that parcel?
That
Yes.
is correct.
Yeah, that's right. I think yep.
And is it zoned as residential currently, or is that in ag?
That is residential.
Residentially zoned.
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you,
R1.
Mr. Horniak. Council, is there any further questions for the administration on item number 6?
Mr. President,
Yeah, Mr. Seaman.
I mean, Mr. Beasley and Mayor, only one house can go on that property though, right?
The way it is currently zoned is a single family, R1 requires a single family dwelling.
So they're not going to try to get a split, administrative split or anything to get 2 houses on there, are they?
Well, and that would be totally up to them. That would be in their right. So that is possible. And we would have, anybody that would have a parcel of the proper size would have that option. So yeah, they could. I think the intent was to build a house, but that's up to the new owner.
And
How much
ultimately,
frontage-
to the
How
approving
much frontage
authority.
is there? Michael Beasley, how much frontage is there, sir?
There was approximately 200 feet.
Yeah, I just dig it up. Yeah, just about.
200, that's easy. That's an easy 2 properties, man. 100 is good for a property there.
Depends on it all depends on what you want.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They paid how much for it?
Well, the offer was $60,000.
Oh, that's all right. That sounds fair. That's good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Seaman.
Thank you.
Council, is there any further questions for the administration on item number 60? Hearing no further questions, I will sign item number 60 with ordinance number 60 of 2020. And ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record. Ms. Evans.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director to enter into a purchase agreement for the sale of city-owned property in an R1 residential zone district known as parcel number 44-27082 and located at 0 Pickle Road in the city of Oregon and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Council.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 60 of 2020 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you please take a roll call of council for passage of ordinance number 60 of 2020 as an emergency measure?
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mrs. Paloff,
yes,
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes.
Thank you, council. Please note that ordinance 60 of 2020 did pass by a vote of 7 yeas, 0 nays. That concludes the items for consideration and passage this evening. And we'll move to the mayor's report. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President and council. I have an appointment and a couple of retirements to announce. I'll first start with asking council's concurrence in the acceptance of the retirement resignation of Deborah Dukeman, and that retirement is scheduled for June 30th, 2020. And I'd ask council's concurrence in accepting the wishes of Deb Dukeman to retire once again, June 30th, 2020.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
President.
Council.
Mr. President, Mr. President.
Mr. Zale.
Yes, I move to concur with the mayor on accepting the retirement of Deborah Dukeman.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zale. Second by Mr. Seaman. Council, any objections? There are no objections. Mayor, council concurs with the acceptance of the retirement resignation letter for Deborah Dukeman.
Okay, thank you, council. And next up, I'd ask council's concurrence in the seasonal hiring of Abigail Riker of 5120 Pickle Road at step 5, $11.40 an hour, classification 5. And the startup date would be tomorrow, May 12th. So council, we have chose not to do many seasonal hires, but we are left with this whole complex and help in the rec department too, with some illnesses. And Abby Riker is the person who for the last 3 years knows the routine here. And they figured there's one thing we can't do is let the sightly nature of this complex, diminish. And under the circumstance of having a seasonal employee with years of past experience, we thought it was a wise thing to not let the looks of our complex here start to take a southern turn. So I'd ask council's concurrence once again in the seasonal appointment of Abigail Riker, step 5, $11.40 an hour, startup date tomorrow, May 12th, 2020.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Reeves.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment for the seasonal help at the, of Abigail Riker.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
second,
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pollock. Council, any objections? There are no objections. Mayor, council concurs with the hiring of Abigail Riker.
Okay, and then lastly, I'd ask council's concurrence, and this is the appointment to fill the finance director position, which will be vacated as when Kathy Hufford retires. And being that I think it's come to be very important that our employees get paid by virtue of the finance director, I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Miss Darlene Huntermark, as startup date would be August 3rd, 2020, to the position of finance director. And it would be at pay range 42, step 5, which is an hourly rate of $50, 43.8 cents an hour, or an annual salary of $104,911.04. And I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment of, once again, Miss Darlene Huntermark. The date startup as August 3rd, 2020.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Seaman?
yes, I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Ms. Hunter Mark to the Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Paula. Council, any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor Council concurs with the appointment of Darlene Huntermark to fill the finance director position upon the retirement of Ms. Hufford.
I thank you, council. And I know sometimes questions come up about how the city is doing with under these odd conditions, but I will have you know that we don't make long-term decisions on how we react to things. We are prepared to do day-to-day changes or hour-to-hour changes of whatever works for us, and we go over it constantly to try to provide the best service we can and keep our employees working and just keep the city, operating as well as we can. And we're prepared once again to make whatever adjustments, changes, or whatever needs to be done to keep the city running. And
Thank
with
you,
that,
Mayor.
I would end my report, and that's it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank
Mr.
you.
President,
Yes, Mr. Reeves.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask you a question? Are we,
That's why I came today.
oh, thank you. Are we withholding any projects, big ticket projects that we have budgeted for at the beginning, during the budget hearings at the end of last year, holding up on them now with the lack of funds that we anticipate we might be getting?
I would start off, and I think Mr. Beasley could follow up too. I think it's safe to say we are looking at every purchase that we have made and budgeted things for. And if we can hold them off or delay them or either change them, kind of use the same verbiage as I did on, we're prepared to make day-to-day, hour-to-hour adjustments, just as we are with budgeted items. We have canceled the purchase of many things, and we will continue to evaluate the needs. And we do not want to cancel something that we find to be a necessity. But if it's not, we figure there's always next week, next year, or something to make a purchase if it's something that we can do without. So we're trying to be as practical as we can, and we will, like I said, continue to evaluate every purchase that we make. And like I said, Mr. Beasley may follow up on it, but my guess is it's going to be very similar to what I just said.
Yeah, I'll follow up, Terry. And
Hey, Mike, just real quick, Mr. Beasley, the reason I'm asking is I know that we had some road projects that might be able to be put off until next year to, help save some money for this year to help out if we needed it. That's what the premise of my question was.
Sure, Terry, that's absolutely, and for all the members, and as we've talked about it in our times over the last several weeks, we know our revenue is going to take a significant hit, the same way our residents and families and small businesses and large businesses are taking hits. We reflect that down and usually a little behind their hit. We were come in behind that. We're looking at every single thing that hadn't begun yet that wasn't a safety issue, and we're slowing down. So just even the little things around rec. We had an open space around the thing. We paved it. We put the concrete at work because it was kind of dangerous. We'll wait on the grandstand. The paving of the road coming into the space where we're gonna put parking to leading up to our new facility and streets to next to rec on the new land we purchased. We're postponing that, at minimum, we're posting them till later in the year. And the likeliest thing is these things will be postponed until next year. Or further down as we look at it. The end loader that we had budgeted for streets. We just talked this week and we said, let's just slow it down. Let's see where it is. And we'll come back to council after we get a sense of our revenue and our needs. And we'll say, look, here's the projects that we're thinking of not going forward with. At minimum, we are delaying them till later in the year. And where practical and possible, we won't do them till next year, or maybe they'll wait too, depending on what happens. So we're kind of assessing that with every single expenditure. That's why the council agenda has been so small. We're not buying stuff.
Mr. Beasley?
Yeah.
The other part of that, do those projects, for instance, let's say we stop a road project and put it off to next year. I don't know if you can answer, or maybe Mr. Roman, does that have to be rebid?
Let Paul go to it. Again, depends on the circumstances. When people bid, they're bidding on the prices for a given year. So if a project's already been bid, it's usually going forward. If we cancel it, that would, in most cases, would have to be rebid unless we negotiate an extension of some kind, because they're bidding on this year's concrete price, this year's fuel price, et cetera, not next year's. So in those cases, they get rebid. But if Paul has a little summary, most of our streets projects, obviously our big Navarre pipeline project was underway.
Right.
And we needed to get that water line done. The cost of that disruption from more water line breaks, that was one of our biggest capital projects we have going. A lot of our other capital, as we said, we're doing the engineering to be prepared to be in position should there be stimulus dollars. We're going to be ready to roll. But we have some projects that are going to be funded primarily with federal or state grants. Those are projects that we're going forward, or those that we partnered with. But there's a lot. Anything else is on the table. So we're at least delayed till later in the year.
Can we hear from Mr. Roman, please, if possible?
Paul, why don't you talk about what we're not doing?
Yeah. So yeah, Mr. President, Mr. Reeves, we did take, as Mr. Beasley mentioned, the road that went to the street building. We did non-perform that, and we'll actually see probably a better price if we do it with the building, and we'll just delay it a year. But yeah, you'd have to rebid it. But yeah, all our projects where we do have big grant dollars, we really need to proceed with those projects. But that's also a lot of those projects are the water and sewer side, where you do have dedicated revenue for that. So a lot of the projects that we're proceeding with do have either grant dollars or a low interest loan involved. Everything else, we are really taking a look at what we can either postpone or not perform. So yeah, a lot of it would just be postponed, and you'd have to rebid it, is the worst.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Beasley, do you have anything to add with your report?
No, just that our goal, depending on how every department's got different schedules. We've had kind of an altered schedule to try and separate folks, try and follow the governor's guidelines. We are looking to have everyone back to a normal schedule by May 18th, depending on the department and how they roll it in. And so go back to our regular shifts by May 18th. We are going to again be following directions from the governor's office and the local county people. I've got a call tomorrow on that about public access. Right now, we're all working, and we're working a lot with the public. They're just not standing around in our hallways. They're doing it on the phone and doing it in other ways. That is gradually going to open up. We're working through those timelines, and we'll keep council informed on how we're going to do that. We'll probably start by appointment, working with people by appointment as we do now. People come in, but we will be over the course of the next month opening up our offices. We're taking to make sure we have steps so that the public feels safe in our space and our workforce feels safe dealing with a variety of people in the public. So we're exploring those things. We'll let council know what we develop as we work through it.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
No report.
Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Zale.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank Paul Roman. I had requested some stats from him. I had a complaint about the intersection of Wynn and Pickle, which from where I live, I drive through the intersection all the time. I didn't think it was going to warrant a four-way stop like the complainants wanted. So Paul, thank you for those stats. I had a feeling it would come out like that. Also, thanks to the city for, I assume we got the Ballard lighting on Navarre Avenue changed to blue for Police Week.
Yes, we did.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's a nice touch.
Great suggestion. And I love that feature that there's one guy who said we could do it. I forget his name. The mayor. When we started looking at the Ballards, he said, hey, we could get them to change colors. And
Yeah,
it was kind of
Yeah.
fun it's kind of a fun feature. And we just told
Yes.
Clay High School today that for their graduation coming up May 30th, I think they're going to do it, by the way, at the drive-in movie theater. Be kind of I might be the 30th or 31st that weekend, but that'll be kind of
Yeah.
fun at the theater. But we'll
That-
change their colors for their colors for that weekend. That'll be kind of fun. So
thank
It is
you for that. I have nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. Zale. Mr. Seaman.
No report at this time.
Mayor, do you want to add something?
I do. I'll let it be known that there'll be COVID-19 testing conducted at the Oregon Walmart on Navarre Avenue on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. beginning Friday, May 22nd. So just for your information, if anybody asks, once again, the testing will be done starting this Friday, May 22nd on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7 a.m. through 9 a.m. The Walmart on Navarre Avenue.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms. Pollock.
now that's not a drive up, get one. You have to have a prescription for that, correct?
yeah, you have to have a doctor's referral. That's correct in the normal system.
Do you know if they're going to get to the point where you're not going to need a prescription or a doctor referral? People can just pull up and get tested if they so choose?
At some point, there'll be enough tests to do that. They still don't have that volume of tests in the market to our knowledge. I'm on a call tomorrow with the Emergency Operations Center, and that's one of the things on our agenda is to talking through that issue. So we're just talking through testing, and at some point people want to, is there going to be antibody testing around, all those things that a lot of people care about. We talk through that stuff every week, and we'll have an update for you. If we've got some news, we'll pass it on as quick as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Davish.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Pollock.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I have no report for my standing committee. So at this point, I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir, Mr. Seaman.
I move to adjourn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Reeves. Council, is there any objections? There are no objections. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thanks all.